epic scale. I remember being young children playing together this one time, and he stole one of my Lego men right in front of me. He slipped it behind his back and tucked it in his pocket, and I said, "Hey!" And he said, "What? You stole my guy." And he said, "No, I didn't." And I said, "I saw you." And he said, "No, you didn't." He was such a powerful and trained liar that God had given him a poker face. And he was so good at lying and deception, even from this early age, that you began to doubt your own eyes. One day at the hall, he was getting up and he said, "Oh, I have to pee so bad." And his parents said, "All right." And so he walks down the Kingdom Hall aisle, goes around the corner, but instead of going into the restroom, he walks out the back door of the Kingdom Hall. And he's out there for 25 minutes until Daniel Sr. finally goes looking for him, finds him outside, and he said, "Oh, Daddy! Oh, I was in the restroom and I heard a small creature outside. It sounded like it was in distress. Well, I came out here, and sure enough, a rock had fallen over on a squirrel. I rescued it and set it free." The bathroom didn't even have a window. It was, there was another time that he went to the restroom and was there for 30 minutes. Daniel Sr. goes back, find him again, he opens the door and says, "Oh, Daddy, there you are. I fell down between the toilet seat and the wall and I got stuck there. I was calling out, but nobody heard me." We were put in a service group together. We're in this big van of people that had been sent to the territory to work 3 blocks on a territory card. And us being 6th graders, they put us together and we were going to work this one side of the street. And Danny Jr. says to me, "Leave the talking to me. We'll do one door." I said, "Okay." We walk up this driveway, go up onto the porch of this house. Now, you being ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, you've obviously heard of ghost knocking, which everyone has done. It's when you go to the door, pretend to knock lightly when you know it's not at home so that you can stand there and kill 5 minutes. Well, Danny Jr. was going to kill 45 minutes by doing a ghost Bible study. He stood there on the porch of this house. He starts talking through the screen door of this not at home, like there's an old lady on the other side there in the dark that he's having a conversation with. He says, "Good morning. We're just here in your neighborhood, encouraging Bible reading. Are you a Bible reader, ma'am?" And the other groups that are working house over house, they pass and walk down the street. And when they're finally out of earshot, Danny Jr. says, "All right, now we just hang out here." We stood on this porch for the next, they worked around the block and over to the next block, and we stood there for most of an hour until the other groups finally returned. And then when Danny Jr. returns to the van and we're sitting there, he makes up an elaborate lie about the doorstep study he had with this old woman, gives her a full backstory, sits there with his call book, writes down lies it was amazing. And this is a 6th grader that has the wherewithal to complete lying on such a grand scale as this. Well, Danny and I were the same age, but we lived on opposite sides of towns and went to different schools. So we were never in school together. But when he entered junior high, he was in school with his older sister Morgan now. The worst thing you can do. It is, for a Jehovah's Witness, it is the most evil act you can possibly think of, is to salute the national flag. You don't do it. It's like stabbing Jehovah in the face with a knife. It's that bad. Morgan tells their father, Daniel Sr., that Danny Jr. has been standing up with the rest of the class and saluting right along with them every morning. And so Daniel Sr., the next day, decides to go to the school grounds. And he stands there in the school courtyard and looks through the window of Danny's classroom and sees with his own eyes Danny standing up with his class and saying the Pledge of Allegiance right along with them with a big smile on his face. Well, after school lets out, Daniel Sr. confronts his son. And Danny Jr. says, "Oh no, Daddy, I was saying a prayer to Jehovah. That's why you saw my lips moving." It was at that moment that Daniel Sr. realized about his son. That he wasn't going through a phase of telling white lies or fibbing. Danny Jr. was an incorrigible, unredeemable liar. And liars do not inherit God's kingdom. Myself and Danny Jr. got baptized like every other 13-year-olds. You have to. If you're a JW kid, no matter what you're doing or how you feel, you have to get baptized. It's just a rudimentary thing. It's just part of the process of being a JW youth. If you don't, it's like a self-imposed grounding. You don't get to go anywhere. You're basically just grounded to your room because your parents won't let you get a driver's license. You won't be invited to anyone's house, and you won't have any privileges or get to go to any get-togethers. So Danny got baptized and subsequently got into trouble. We were in different schools and stuff then, but I remember that Danny apparently was involved in some cheating scandal with worldly kids at school, that he had been conspiring with them to cheat on test papers. But the big ending came when he was a senior in high school. Danny Jr. got his worldly girlfriend pregnant. Apparently he had this secret girlfriend, and she got pregnant, was going to have a baby, and Danny was, of course, disfellowshipped there afterwards, in which he had a big fight with his family, and they kicked him out of the house. He was 18 at this point, and I guess he spent a couple nights in the park sleeping on a bench until he humbled himself, came and knocked on the door, and they let him return under the idea that he was repentant now and going to begin working his way back towards reinstatement. And it seemed that Danny had turned a new leaf. He was talking about how much he loved Jehovah, how much he wanted to get right with him, and he was making all the necessary steps. He was going to meetings, studying, saying all the right things. He even got a job. They couldn't believe it. Danny Jr. got a job at Walgreens. It was the first time he had shown that sort of initiative and responsibility, and they were very, very proud of him. He was disfellowshipped, he was in the doghouse, but he was working his way back. Well, a couple weeks passed. Daniel Sr. still couldn't fight this nagging feeling inside. He knew Danny so well. The pieces didn't seem to fit. Anyway, Daniel Sr., he's about to leave work one day, and he decides to pick up the phone, and he calls Walgreens and asks to speak to the general manager. And the guy answers, and he says, "Hello?" And Daniel Sr. says, "Hi, I'm Danny Jr.'s father. I was just calling to check up on him, make sure he's working out all right." And the guy says, "Who's Danny?" Daniel Sr. hangs up the phone, and he drives home that evening. And he walks in the house. His daughter Morgan is standing there, and he says, "Where's Danny Jr.?" And she says, "He's downstairs in his room committing suicide." And Daniel Sr. says, "What?" Well, apparently Danny Jr. was down there, standing in his closet with a necktie hooked up to the closet rack there, and Morgan, his sister, had walked by the open door of the room and seen him standing in his closet there pretending to hang himself. And Daniel Sr. is so frustrated right now, he doesn't even want to deal with it. He said, "We're going to ignore him. We're going to sit down and have dinner." And so they proceed to have dinner in the kitchen there. About a half hour in, Danny, I guess he gets tired of waiting for attention. He starts moaning. But the family just continues ignoring him until they finally hear this tumbling sound. Well, I guess he had pulled down all the contents of the closet and crumpled to the floor, and the whole family goes down the stairs to Danny Jr.'s bedroom. He's laying there sprawled out with a tie around his neck. And Daniel Sr. says, "Get up. Danny Sr.'s pretending to be unconscious, laying there, and Daniel Sr. reaches down and grabs him and lifts him up and says, "Get up and get out of my house. Morgan, put his clothes in a bag." And Danny Jr. says, Oh, Daddy, what happened?" And he marches him up the stairs and starts walking him to the front door. Danny Jr. says, "Daddy, don't put me out there, it's cold." But he opens the front door, puts the bag in his hands, and Danny Jr. says, "I love you, Daddy." Slams the door. And that was the end of Danny Jr. From that point on, they treated him as a disfellowshipped person. They did keep tabs on him, which is something JWs do with their disfellowshipped relatives. They don't communicate with them. They don't have that interaction, but through third parties, they always keep track of them and try to gather as much information as they can. Apparently, Danny had, after that point, gone to his worldly girlfriend's house, and her parents allowed him to live there under the premise that they were going to get married and start a new family. Danny even got a job, a real job this time, at Dog and Shake, and he was working there for a couple of weeks until that first Friday when he got his check. The first check that Danny got, he disappeared, and no one saw him after that. He didn't come home. He didn't return to work. They just never saw him again. Eventually, Danny Jr.'s girlfriend did have her baby, which they named Daniel III, but Danny was not reappearing until one evening, about a year later. Daniel Sr. and his wife, they were at another couple's house having dinner one evening when they get a call on the phone that Danny Jr. had overdosed and he's in the emergency room. Well, they grab their things and they immediately race towards the hospital. As they're driving, Daniel Sr.'s mind is also racing. He can't believe it. Now, Danny Jr. had always been kind of a bad boy, but drugs? Drugs. Danny Jr. He was astonished. This can't be happening. And he began getting choked up and fighting back a tear. He had always known a side of Danny Jr. that other people really didn't see. He remembered when Danny was 8 years old, him bringing home a big handful of dandelions and handing it to him and saying, "Here you go, Daddy. I stopped at the flower shop. Spent all my allowance buying these for you." When Daniel Sr. and his wife arrived at the hospital, they walk into the reception area and their daughter Morgan is standing there. And Daniel Sr. said, "What's happening?" And Morgan said, apparently Danny Jr. swallowed a bunch of aspirins. It's another one of his suicide attempts. And they're pumping his stomach right now. And Daniel Sr. said, "Can this cause any kind of brain damage or something like that?" And Morgan says, "I don't think so." Daniel Sr. looks down the hallway at Danny Jr.'s hospital room. The door is halfway open, and he starts to take a step. His wife grabs him by the shoulder and said, "Don't let him see you walk down that hall. It's what he wants." Daniel Sr. regains his strength. He composes himself, and he walks over to the hospital desk and says, "When Danny Jr. is released from the hospital, inform him that his family will not pay any medical bills. He's on his own." And they walk out of the hospital and get their car and drive home. Daniel Sr. is still distraught. And so his wife gets out their convention notes from the Summer District Assembly. And they specifically start reviewing the public talk that was given about parents of disfellowshipped children remaining strong and continuing to shun their children. They reviewed the notes about how this is counsel and advice from Jehovah, and that by following this practice, they can reap the benefits of a rich reward. if they remain loyal to Jehovah above all else. And so that kind of reestablished Daniel Sr.'s strength, and he felt a bit better. His wife said, here's what we can do. We'll call our family doctor and ask him to check in on Danny Jr. He'll kind of be the intermediary. And that way we won't have any contact, but we'll know that he's going to be okay. And that sounded good to Daniel Sr., and so they call the doctor's office and leave a message for him. And the next day, Daniel Sr. calls the doctor again to follow up and asked him if he had a chance to go to the hospital and check on Danny Jr.'s situation, and the doctor said yes. Danny Jr. ingested about half a family-sized bottle of aspirin. The corrosive nature of the aspirin ate away his stomach lining and caused internal bleeding. And Daniel Sr. says, was there any damage to his heart or any sort of brain damage? And the doctor said, no. Daniel Sr. said, thank you, doctor. I have a request. Could you not let Danny know that I asked about him? Don't let him know that I cared or wanted you to check in on him. It's very important to me. I know that may sound strange and you may not understand. And the doctor said, no, Daniel, you don't understand. You can't live without a stomach lining. Danny Jr. died at 1:30 this morning.
Seat in the wall and I got stuck there. I was calling out but nobody heard me.
We were put in a service group together. We're in this big van of people that had been sent to the territory to work 3 blocks on a territory card. And us being 6th graders, they put us together and we were going to work this one side of the street. And Danny Jr. says to me, leave the talking to me. We'll do one door. I said, okay. We walk up this driveway, go up onto the porch of this house. Now, even from this early age, that you began to doubt your own eyes. One day at the hall, he was getting up and he said, oh, I have to pee so bad. And his parents said, all right. And so he walks down the Kingdom Hall aisle, goes around the corner, but instead of going into the restroom, he walks out the back door of the Kingdom Hall. And he's out there for 25 minutes. Until Daniel Sr. finally goes looking for him, finds him outside, and he said, one of my Lego men right in front of me. He slipped it behind his back and tucked it in his pocket, and I said, hey. And he said, what? You stole my guy. And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, I saw you. And he said, no, you didn't. He was such a powerful and trained liar that God had given him a poker face. And he was so good at lying and deception. An epic scale. I remember being young children playing together this one time, and he stole one.
Oh, Daddy! Oh, I was in the restroom and I heard a small creature outside. It sounded like it was in distress. Well, I came out here, and sure enough, a rock had fallen over on a squirrel. I rescued it and set it free.
The bathroom didn't even have a window. It was there was another time that he went to the restroom and was there for 30 minutes. Daniel Sr. goes back, find him again, he opens the door and says, oh, Daddy, there you are. I fell down.